Yo, what's good, Celtics fans? Welcome to the first episode of the Vitamin C's podcast in conjunction with the Vitamin C's newsletter. You can see the link on the description, and you can also see the link in this cool little layover that we've got going on right here. Before we get into it, make sure to hit that subscribe button, the thumbs up button, show us some love. We like love, you like love. Let's all be loving. I'm joined by Mr. Tim Shields. He's going to be my compadre throughout this Vitamin C's audio visual journey. So whenever you've got a video from us, guys, Mr. Tim will be with me. Tim and I have done podcasts previously. We've got a good idea of the way each other think about the game, and we're hoping that you guys enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, I'd recommend that you definitely still tune in, because why wouldn't you want more basketball content? Tim, man, what's good, bro?
Nothing much, man. I'm excited about the news last night that dropped. Marcus Smart inked that brand new extension for 4 years, 77 million. So I'm interested in your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I mean, that works out at what, 19.25 million a year if you divide it by four. I had a hard stop at 20 million a year. That was like, I remember being on Spotify Green Room a few months back and being like, anything over 20 million is an overpay. Anything under is completely fine with me. My hard stop was at that 20 million. I think that for Boston to get him for under that 20 mil and for Marcus Smart to get the pay increase that he's got, for me, it's a win-win everywhere. I know some people are like, oh, but can we still get Bradley Beal? Can we still chase a free agent? And we can hit on that in a moment. But right now, where I'm at, I'm kind of like, to me, this tells me that Brad Stevens is saying, hey, I want to build around the core of Jalen, Jason, and Marcus. And that's kind of where my brain's at the moment, just waking up to the news and kind of digesting everything that I've seen in the media this far.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, like you said, with that pay, I did not want to see 4 years, 80 mil. And while this is only 3 mil under, the important thing is scaling. So a lot to do with contracts. You can go ahead and make it like the equal amount across all 4 years. For Marcus's contract, it's actually scaled up, so he doesn't even hit 20 million until I think that's the 2024 year of his contract. So that's going to be year 3 on this extension. So 4 years down the line from now. So that's actually a good thing. That's going to, with the salary cap adjusting over the years, you expect it to go up a little bit. So as long as that cap hit stays under, that's a good deal. That is the best of both worlds. That is the market pay for Marcus Smart. I don't think he was going to get any more than that, but he could have. And honestly, playing that long ball game, waiting this whole season out in order to try and get that contract situation figured out, that is not a good move. It would have been tension in the locker room. Marcus Smart in a contract year, going into a summer where you're not going to have a lot of flexibility to begin with. This gives you a guy that's locked up who wants to be here, who's part of your pieces so far. And if you want to move on from him later down the line, you have him on long-term deal. So that's going to help with his overall trade value if you wanted to move him. But I think this also speaks volumes to rewarding a guy who wants to be here, who wants to play in Boston, and is a locker room leader for this team.
Yeah, and that question about whether Marcus Smart is a locker room leader, whether Brad Stevens actually valued what Marcus brought to the table, and it was Danny Ainge that was keeping him around. That question's been answered. I love the fact that Marcus Smart retweeted that article where it was saying the complete opposite, that, hey, maybe Brad Stevens isn't a fan of Marcus Smart. I like that kind of like sticking it to the media when the media are kind of grasping at straws. And I get it. You're only as good as the information you provided. If the information sucks, the reporting is never going to be the best, because the information you're given sucks, and that's no one's fault. It is what it is. But I completely understand in terms of, like, I always thought that Marcus Smart was underpaid in terms of his impact on the floor. I thought that it was always a great deal for Boston, sucked a little bit for Marcus, a couple of $1 million too short, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, when he's chucking up 10 threes a game and hitting on like 2 of them and he's having one of his off nights, even his old contract looked like an overpay. Let's not lie. But at the same time, it is, as you said, it's a good reward for his play and his longevity with the team. It's also a good reward for a guy that is ideally the main leader of the roster. But also, as you've pointed out, it's still a tradable deal. This is not an albatross contract. It's not Al Horford's deal. It's not what Kemba Walker's deal was, where a buyout is the only viable option really to get off of that money. And it weren't Boston that bought him out, but Kemba did end up with that buyout. This is a very reasonable deal that can match salaries somewhere. The only question I have is, will Marcus Smart be the same guy in 4 years with the way he plays and the wear and tear on his body? Is he going to have to kind of take that foot off the pedal a little bit towards the last year of that deal just because of the aches and pains and the stresses he's putting on his muscles and his ligaments? We don't know, you know? Every deal's a risk. You've seen it with Gordon Hayward, you've seen it with Kemba Walker. To a lesser extent, you saw it with Kyrie Irving. Every deal is a risk, but at least you know what you're paying for in Marcus. It feels like the last few guys you've brought through the door, you're paying on reputation elsewhere. And then when they're in Boston, that shit just not working. They're not meshing together, and it's ridiculously infuriating. So I'm fine with this deal, man. From a value on impact, maybe it's a slight overpay, but it's so minimal that I feel like this is good value every which way you look at it.
Yeah, and I think if he hit free agency, somebody would have scooped him for the same amount of money or maybe just in that ballpark. And the question is whether or not Boston would have gone out of their way at that point to try and give him money. Because if he came with an offer that was similar, and who knows, maybe there's a lot of haggling with the agent. But I think right now this is what Marcus Smart wants. This is what the team wants. And in terms of how that contract's going to age, I think we got to see how he's going to play under Ime Udoka. I think his style of defense might change a little bit. Maybe he's not, diving for as many loose balls. Maybe he's playing a little bit smarter defense. No pun intended. But I am interested to see how this is going to work out with Udoka. We know that he's a defensive-minded coach. He's talked about wanting to get the ball into Marcus Smart's hands more. So maybe we kind of see a different kind of Marcus Smart this year. Obviously, when he was going into a contract year, the last time we saw him, he shot the lights out, at least in relative comparison to the rest of his career. So I'm interested to see how he's going to do under Ime Udoka. I am actually, it's crazy for me to say this, but I'm looking forward to preseason basketball. I want to see Marcus Smart and how he's going to fit into this system and how this offense is going to work. You're talking about a Greg Popovich disciple. So I'm interested to see how this offense is going to work with the Jays and Marcus Smart, specifically with Marcus Smart having the ball in his hands more.
Yeah, I think another point to note as well is this is one of the better defensive teams Marcus Smart's going to be playing on in 3 or 4 years at a minimum. With Josh Richardson's there, Dennis Schroeder's there, Al Horford's back. There's a lot of point of attack defenders now that should ease that burden on Smart. If Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown kind of knuckle down and really focus their efforts on D as well, now this team's got multiple guys where you can switch everything and it's not all going to be on Smart as your primary. If somebody gets past Smart, then everything's screwed. That type of mentality is gone now. There's so many different guys you can plug and play, and we don't know if Udoka is going to go with a switch everything system. He may go with something more traditional. He may go with the switch everything. And yes, I did say he may. I was making a dad joke. I've done it many times and many people have missed it, but there we go. But I do think that there's so many different opportunities for Smart now to be a ball handler, to operate more as a playmaker, perhaps do more off ball and look to step into those threes where he seems most comfortable. I do know his percentages say he feels more comfortable off the dribble, but if you can just step into open looks, then that's great. And then defensively, you're not going 100% on every possession because there's other guys picking up the slack for you. So I'm not too worried about preseason. I'm just very encouraged by the construction of this roster at this point. You've got rim protectors. You've got a rim runner in Robert Williams. You've got a 5-out offense guy in Al Horford. If you need to inject energy, you can go Bruno Fernando. If you need to inject post scoring, you can go Enes Kanter. Wing scoring, you've got Richardson, Neesmith, Brown, Tatum. This roster is so deep that by locking up Marcus Smart, what you're effectively saying is we're not doubling down on this year, but we're doubling down on you three guys to be able to fit with what we're trying to build. And I like how Stevens has constructed this longer, bigger wingspan, defensive-minded roster. I'm excited, man. I think this deal just kind of puts the cherry on the top of an already amazing summer from the Celtics front office.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this not only keeps flexibility for now in terms of what their roster is going to be for terms of their ceiling. You're adding a bunch of depth pieces. And now I think like with last season with Kemba Walker was out, you were depending on Marcus Smart. So he probably felt some of that kind of pressure. But now Marcus Smart's in that starting role and you have a lot of depth behind him. So adding Dennis Schroeder on the deal that he's at as a bargain deal, you've got Pritchard as well. and you've got Josh Richardson who can handle the ball. And who knows what other moves might still be there. We've got Chris Dunn for the time being. Looks like he might stay. Yamadar apparently is going to be going overseas for a multi-year deal. So that's what you're working with for your guard depth. But even still, looking at this roster, I feel a lot better about it now than I did last year. And so far, so good for Brad Stevens. This is pretty awesome to see him kind of slide into this role and being able to do what he's done so far. Must feel a little bit of confidence for the Jays and Smart as well going forward. A little bit of a show of faith from the guy who's been coaching them for the past, 5 some odd years.
I think the other thing we need to look at as well, and I kind of touched on this at the start of the episode or the show. It's a show. It's not a podcast no more. It's a show. We're on camera. It's a show. But the one thing I did touch on was this does kind of remove the Celtics max salary cap space or the road to max salary cap space next summer, simply because in order to have got there, Marcus Smart would have had to have been moved away or released in free agency. And I've seen people like, oh, well, you can just trade Horford and get to that cap space number. Well, in a vacuum, yeah, but in real life, money has to come back in that trade. No team's going to absorb that. And people see that partially guaranteed and think it's only 14.5 for the year. That's not it. After a while, that trigger will guarantee the remainder of the contract. So there's no easy way to max cap space now. It doesn't mean the Celtics can't pursue a Bradley Beal or whoever else, a Zach LaVine or whoever else may become available during free agency next year. But it means they'd have to look down the sign and trade route. And that just gets things a little bit messier when there's going to be other teams that can just come in and make an offer. And if the guy is looking at signing trades, what if Philly still have Ben Simmons this time next year? What if Dame Lillard decides he wants out next year and you can do a Beal for Lillard swap? There's so many things that you have to take into account that this hasn't destroyed all hope of a third star next free agency, but it's definitely made that path more difficult, right?
Yeah, I think in terms of getting max contract space, I don't think it was really going to happen. I think when you really look at the numbers, look at the contracts, it was just going to be really difficult. And the Al Horford contract language was really confusing people for a while, myself included. But yeah, with those guarantees, guaranteed money always sets in eventually. There is a guaranteed date for all non-guaranteed contracts. So once that deadline passes, whatever is guaranteed is guaranteed. But in terms of what they can do for flexibility, I think an opt-in and trade for Bradley Beal is still on the table. So we'll see what happens there. I think that there's a lot of trade options available, but it'll take some finagling. But I'm interested to watch how it unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, there are trade options available. We can't lie. There are guys available on this roster that you can move in trade scenarios. The biggest issue is Marcus Smart is usually that name that's thrown in. And that's not going to change. As we said, this is a tradable contract. It's a salary matching deal. It makes a bunch of sense. And Smart, due to his value and impact towards winning, is always going to be a desirable target for other teams in any trade discussions. Once you shoot down Jalen and Jason and you take them off the table, Smart is usually the first name guys are going to want to put on. Now, from my standpoint, where I'm looking at right now, I'm like, well, that's perfectly fine, but the optics of that aren't great. You trade Marcus Smart this year, it's going to have that poison pill. So the team taking Marcus Smart is going to have enough cap room to take his extension value, whereas Boston only free up the value of the contract as it stands now. Generally, poison pill contracts don't really get traded that often. And if you do trade Marcus Smart in the offseason next year, when that extension kicks in, what message does that send to other guys on the roster? You can sign an extension with us, but we're going to boot you out of here as quick as possible before that extent. We're just moving away from that poor narrative of Boston doesn't care about its players and doesn't look after its players that the Celtics kind of doubled down on when they traded IT. And with Brad Stevens, you get a chance to do things a little bit differently. So I don't see Marcus Smart being included in a trade in the next 18 months, realistically, unless it's kind of, how can I put it? Unless Marcus Smart agrees to it, unless it's to a team that Marcus Smart wants to go to. And things would have to gone unbelievably wrong for that to actually happen.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that would have to roll that way. And even then, I agree with the optics. Like you kind of went through these multiple free agencies where you have these max contract guys, Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker, Al Horford. Al Horford chose to sign here ended up leaving for more money in Philly, and now he's happy to be back here. So that's good for optics because he's like, I'm home. And that's huge. Kemba Walker chose to sign here in free agency, but by the time he's getting booted out to OKC, he wants to split. And obviously, we know what happened with Kyrie Irving too. So it's just interesting to see a guy finally get that deal to stay here long term, and he wants to play here. So, I think that's important for culture, and I think that's important for the Celtics.
I mean, let's kind of wrap this up because these shows are only going to be 15, 20 minutes long because, people have got stuff to do their day. If you was to put down a winner and a loser, would you say that who comes out more of a winner with this deal? Would you say the Celtics win more, or has Marcus Smart got the better end of this deal? And I understand we both think it's a win-win, but who's coming out marginally better off?
I think the Celtics.
Yeah, I think the Celtics too. I think they've got that tradable deal. They've got that guy that can impact now. It's definitely the Celtics. I think that wraps us up. Everybody, if you're looking for daily doses of Celtics content, hit up the Vitamin C's newsletter. You can see the link there, vitamincs.substack.com, your daily dose of Celtics content. I'm releasing it Monday through Friday. If you want to follow us on socials, you can hit me up. You can see all my socials on this nice little visual here, at Adam Taylor NBA. I cover the league as a full-time freelance NBA journalist at multiple places. And then you can follow Mr. Tim Shields at Tim Shields NBA and hit him up on his Medium account where he's dropping some knowledge about the C's whenever he feels fit. Guys, thank you for listening. And girls, sorry, folks, thank you for listening. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that share button, and we'll be back again tomorrow, Monday through Friday, with your daily dose of Celtics content. Peace.
Cheers.